After the heavy losses suffered by the Spanish fleet during the Spanish-American War of 1898, Spain made several unsuccessful efforts to initiate a naval rebuilding program. In the wake of the First Moroccan Crisis, which strengthened Spain's diplomatic ties with Britain and France and boosted domestic support for military modernization, the Spanish government reached an agreement with both powers for a mutual defense arrangement. In return for British and French backing in safeguarding Spain's national security, the Spanish Navy would provide support to the French fleet should conflict arise with the Triple Alliance. This made a stronger Spanish fleet strategically beneficial to Britain and France, who responded by offering technical expertise to aid Spain's development of modern warships. The shipbuilding contracts went to the Spanish firm Sociedad Española de Construcción Naval, created by the British firms Vickers, Armstrong Whitworth, and John Brown and Company. The ships were authorized roughly 6 months after Britain had launched the revolutionary all-big gun HMS Dreadnought, prompting Spain to abandon outdated pre-dreadnought designs in favor of constructing dreadnought battleships of its own. Jaime I measured 132.6 meters, or 435 feet at the waterline, and 140 meters, or 459 feet 4 inches overall in length. Her beam was 24 meters, or 78 feet 9 inches, with a draft of 7.8 meters, or 25 feet 7 inches, and a midships freeboard of 4.6 meters, or 15 feet. She had a standard displacement of 15,700 metric tons and a full load displacement of 16,450 metric tons. The battleship was powered by 4 Parsons steam turbines connected to 4 screw propellers with steam generated by 12 Yarrow boilers. This propulsion system delivered 15,500 shaft horsepower, enabling a maximum speed of 19.5 knots. At a cruising speed of 10 knots, Jaime I could travel 5,000 nautical miles without refueling. She carried a complement of 854 personnel, including both officers and enlisted sailors. Jaime I was equipped with a primary armament of 8 12-inch 50-caliber guns, arranged in 4 twin turrets. 1 turret was located forward, 2 were staggered amidships in an en-echelon configuration, and the last was positioned aft of the superstructure. This layout was selected over the super-firing turret arrangement used in the U.S. South Carolina-class battleships, primarily to reduce both weight and construction costs. Her secondary armament for protection against torpedo boats consisted of 24-inch guns, each housed in individual casemates along the hull. However, their low placement near the waterline made them ineffective in rough seas. Additional weapons included 4 3-pounder guns and 2 machine guns. Her armor belt amidships was 8 inches thick, with the same level of protection applied to the main battery turrets. The conning tower had armor 10 inches thick on its sides, while her armored deck had a thickness of 1.5 inches. Jaime I, named after James I of Aragon, the 13th century king, was laid down at the SECN shipyard in Ferrol on the 5th of February 1912. She was launched on the 21st of September 1914, shortly after the outbreak of the First World War. Although Spain remained neutral in the conflict, construction was significantly delayed due to Britain being the primary supplier of her armament and essential components. By early 1915, Jaime I was nearly complete except for her main battery guns and mountings, which could not be delivered during wartime. She underwent initial engine trials in May 1915, and though she was seaworthy by 1917, final completion did not occur until well after the war's end. Her official sea trials took place in May 1921, during which she slightly surpassed a speed of 20 knots. final outfitting was completed on the 20th of December that year. After commissioning, Jaime I joined her two sister ships in the first squadron of the Spanish Navy. In the early 1920s, Jaime I supported Spanish Army operations in Morocco during the Riff War, which had begun in mid-1921. Her sister ship España was lost in 1923 during operations off the Moroccan coast. At the same time, growing tensions surrounding European colonial interests in North Africa, fueled in part by Italian dictator Benito Mussolini's frustration over Italy's limited gains from its World War I alliance with Britain and France, prompted closer ties between Italy and Spain. In 1923, Spain, under the rule of dictator Miguel Primo de Rivera, sought to strengthen diplomatic relations by dispatching a naval squadron to Italy. The fleet included Jaime I, her sister ship Alfonso XIII, the light cruiser Reina Victoria Eugenia, 2 destroyers, and 4 submarines. They departed from Valencia on November 16th, made port calls in La Spezia and Naples, and returned to Barcelona on November 30th. In 1924, Jaime I was damaged by Riff insurgents operating a coastal artillery battery. By the following year, the conflict had expanded as the Riff rebels launched attacks on French positions in adjacent French Morocco. In response, Spain and France organized a major joint amphibious operation at Alhucemas, aiming to strike at the heart of rebel-held territory in September. The landing force included approximately 13,000 troops, 11 tanks, and 160 aircraft. The Spanish Navy contributed Jaime I, Alfonso XIII, 4 cruisers, a seaplane tender, and several smaller vessels, while the French supported the effort with the battleship Paris, 2 cruisers, and other ships. Both navies provided artillery support for the successful landings on September 8th. Following 2 years of intense combat, the Riff Rebellion was finally crushed. In the closing days of the war in October 1927, King Alfonso XIII, Queen Victoria Eugenie, and several generals including Miguel Primo de Rivera, Francisco Franco, Damaso Berenguer, and Ricardo Burguede visited the now pacified region. Boarding Jaime I at Algeciras on October 5th, they crossed to Ceuta in Morocco, and after completing their inspection, returned to Spain aboard the ship on October 10th. By the early 1930s, the economic strain of the Great Depression fueled mounting domestic discontent with the dictatorship of Miguel Primo de Rivera, leading to his resignation on January 28th and, shortly after, the exile of King Alfonso XIII in April 1931. In response, the newly established Second Spanish Republic implemented austerity measures to address the budgetary shortfalls left over from the Riff War. As part of these cutbacks, both España and Jaime I were placed into reserve at Ferrol on June 15th. Jaime I was later recommissioned on the 20th of April 1933 to serve as the fleet flagship. Though proposals to modernize the España-class battleships dated back to the 1920s, escalating tensions with Italy in the mid-30s increased urgency to act on them. One such plan, proposed in 1934, envisioned rebuilding the ships along the lines of the German Deutschland-class cruisers, with oil-fired boilers replacing coal-fired systems. The hulls would have been lengthened, the main gun turrets repositioned along the center line, and the outdated secondary guns replaced with dual-purpose 4.7-inch weapons. However, the modernization plan was ultimately abandoned. The final modernization plan for Jaime I and España called for raising the height of the wing turrets' barbettes to enhance their firing arcs and enable them to fire over the newly designed secondary battery, which was to feature 12 120mm dual-purpose guns mounted openly on the upper deck. The anti-aircraft defenses were to be strengthened with either 10 1-inch guns or 8 1.6-inch guns. Additional upgrades included improved fire control systems, expanded crew accommodations, and the installation of anti-torpedo bulges, among other enhancements. Work on both battleships was scheduled to commence in early 1937, but the planned refits were disrupted by the outbreak of the Spanish Civil War following the coup of July 1936, halting all progress. In mid-July 1936, Jaime I was anchored in Vigo and was, at that moment, the only battleship ready for deployment, as her sister ship España was undergoing repairs in Ferrol. General Francisco Franco, leader of the Nationalist uprising against the Republic, depended on support from Navy defectors to transport the Army of Africa to mainland Spain. By July 13th, naval crews stationed in Ferrol were already aware of the impending coup and convened to discuss their response should their officers side with Franco. On the morning of July 18th, radio operators at Navy headquarters in Madrid intercepted communications from Franco to rebel forces in Morocco. These warnings were quickly relayed to every ship in the fleet, advising crews to be vigilant against mutinous officers. In Cartagena, including aboard Jaime I, sailors rose up after discovering that many of their commanders were siding with the Nationalists, killing several officers and securing the fleet for the Spanish Republican Navy. Jaime I was spared the worst of the violence, as her captain chose to remain loyal to the Republic. On July 19th, Jaime I set sail to help prevent the Nationalist forces from crossing to mainland Spain, linking up with other Republican naval units off Gibraltar later that day. Although the Republican government retained control over most of the fleet in the Mediterranean, it failed to stop the Army of Africa from reaching Spanish soil. The fleet's effectiveness was severely hampered by a breakdown in discipline, as most officers had been killed or removed, and the surviving ones were viewed with suspicion by their crews. Further complicating efforts, the German Kriegsmarine had deployed the heavy cruisers Deutschland and Admiral Scheer to escort convoys transporting heavy weaponry. Meanwhile, thousands of troops were airlifted to Spain using Junkers Ju-52 transport planes secretly provided by Nazi Germany. During the early months of the Spanish Civil War, Jaime I bombarded several nationalist-held positions, including Ceuta, Melilla, and Algeciras. While shelling Algeciras, she managed to hit the nationalist gunboat Eduardo Dado with her secondary guns, setting the vessel ablaze and burning it down to the waterline, though it was later salvaged, repaired, and returned to service. On the 13th of August, Jaime I came under attack by nationalist aircraft while in port at Malaga. Two bombers from the German Condor Legion struck in the early morning, scoring a direct hit with a small bomb near the bow. The resulting damage was minimal. At the outbreak of the Spanish Civil War, nationalist forces seized the portion of the Spanish fleet stationed in Ferrol, including the battleship España, which was soon employed to enforce a naval blockade of northern ports such as Gijon, Santander, and others. In reaction to these actions, the Republicans dispatched a flotilla of 5 submarines from the Mediterranean, although one was lost to nationalist attacks during the journey. To bolster the defense, the Republicans also temporarily sent Jaime I, accompanied by 2 light cruisers and 6 destroyers, to the port of Gijon, where they arrived on September 25th. On October 2nd, after receiving news that the destroyer Almirante Ferrandis had been sunk by nationalist forces, crew members from Jaime I retaliated by marching to the prison ship Cabo Quilates, anchored in the Bilbao estuary, where they executed dozens of detainees suspected of supporting the rebellion. In response to the massacre, the Basque government ordered the execution of several of the sailors involved and demanded that the battleship Jaime I leave the port of Bilbao. The squadron departed on October 13th without having engaged España or any other Nationalist vessels. The Nationalists had avoided direct confrontation with the Republican fleet, largely due to Jaime I being in considerably better condition than España, which at the time had only 3 of her 4 turrets operational. Upon departure, the Republican force left behind 2 submarines and 1 destroyer, while several of Jaime I's secondary guns were removed and later mounted on 4 fishing vessels. In early 1937, Jaime I entered dry dock in Cartagena to undergo repairs following a recent grounding incident. On May 21st, shortly after she had been refloated, a formation of 5 Savoia Marchetti SM-79 bombers from the Italian Aviazione Legionaria launched an airstrike against her. Republican anti-aircraft defenses proved ineffective, allowing the bombers to make 2 passes over the ship and drop approximately 6,100 kilogram or 220-pound bombs. Accounts of the damage inflicted differ. Historian Albert Nofi reports 3 hits resulting in only light damage, while Marco Mattioli claims the attack yielded 2 direct hits, 2 near misses on the starboard side, and 3 additional bombs striking the adjacent quay, rendering the vessel inoperative. On June 17th, while moored in Cartagena, Jaime I was destroyed by a catastrophic internal explosion and ensuing fire, though sabotage was widely suspected. The blast claimed the lives of approximately 200 crew members. Although the ship was later refloated, the damage was deemed irreparable. She was officially removed from the Naval Register on the 3rd of July 1939 and subsequently dismantled for scrap. Her guns, however, were salvaged and repurposed in 1940 for coastal defense batteries near Tarifa, guarding the Strait of Gibraltar. 4 of the main guns, 2 from the forward turret and 2 from the aft, were installed at the Vigia Battery and Cascabel Battery, respectively. Each installation featured a reinforced concrete gun emplacement with an ammunition magazine and an adjacent command post. Although both batteries were decommissioned in 1985, their structures remained standing, though in a deteriorated condition due to neglect.